Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolu. To the United States now, where the death of the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Badar Ginsberg has sparked an intense political debate about the process of appointing her successor, a discussion that has already come to dominate the campaign leading up to November's presidential election. Speaking at a rally in North Carolina, President Trump vowed to nominate a woman and announce his decision in the next few days. Well, the nomination is subject to a vote in the Senate, where Mr. Trump's Republican Party have a small majority. Democrats insist that replacing Justice Ginsburg should wait until after November's election, a point repeatedly made by the Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden.
Now, in a raw political move, this president and the Republican leader have decided to jam a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court through the United States Senate. That's the last thing we need at this moment. As I said, voters have already begun casting their votes. So I appeal to those few Senate Republicans, the handful who really will decide what happens. Please follow your conscience. Don't vote to confirm anyone nominated under the circumstances President Trump and Senator McConnell have created. Don't go there. Uphold your constitutional duty, your conscience.
So Article 2 of our Constitution says the President shall nominate justices of the Supreme Court. I don't think it can be any more clear, can it? I don't think so. I don't think so. The chant, this is a new one. Fill that seat. This is the chant. This can only happen to me. Fill that seat. No, it says the president is supposed to fill the seat, right? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to fill the seat. So we will uphold equal justice under the law for citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed. I will be putting forth a nominee next week. It will be a woman.
President Trump and before him Joe Biden. Well, for more on the trailblazing life of Justice Ginsburg and how her death has sparked a row about who should succeed her, I'm joined now from Philadelphia by Kendyl Gilmore, an attorney and associate with the law firm Hogan Lovells, who represented the rape and abuse network in the sexual assault retrial of the American entertainer Bill Cosby. I'm also joined here in the studio by Arise correspondent Carl Bostic. Thank you very much indeed, Kendyl, for joining us. And as a lawyer who is a woman, I wonder how much Justice Ruth Badar Ginsberg was somebody who was a lodestar for you, because in your study as a lawyer, I'm sure you came across other people who were mentors to you, but while you were studying, I mean, to what extent was she the person that you turned to?
It's a great question, and I think that Ruth Badar Ginsberg was an idol both to me and to many lawyers in the United States, particularly women, and her legacy is one that is an enormous loss. When I was studying and when many others were studying, it was an enormous lesson to read the opinions of Ruth Badar Ginsberg in her time on the court and to study her strategy from her career as a lawyer with the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, prior to her appointment. One of the primary takeaways from Ruth Badar Ginsberg has been her commitment to equality for women, as well as her dedication to fair-mindedness and her ability to speak and use her voice in dissent when necessary, with conviction and with respect. Further, one of the things that she had talked about at length during her life was how her life provided a really beautiful balance to her work. She said that particularly when she was studying law with a newborn, she was able to give herself fully to the law because her life at home provided a respite from the other. And those moments and those lessons from Ruth Badar Ginsberg are an inspiration both to me and I know to many other women who work in the legal field here in the United States.
Absolutely. And when you think of the key legal decisions that she took or was involved in, I mean, you're obviously a lawyer of some repute yourself. I mean, what would you point to?
So there were many cases that she worked on both prior to serving as a Supreme Court justice and once she was on the bench. I think one of the important things to note is the role the Supreme Court actually plays in the day-to-day life of Americans here. We rely on the Supreme Court not only to interpret the law, but to actually be the arbiter of justice and a check and a balance on the other two branches when things don't go according to plan. So when you have an advocate like Ruth Bader Ginsberg practicing before the court for many years and then serving on the bench, her impact can't be overstated. So before she served on the court, you had her landmark case serving for the ACLU, Craig v. Boren, which really created this intermediate level of scrutiny for gender discrimination cases that had not existed before then. And what she said during that case was that gender discrimination is real, it's pervasive, and it's something that we should be skeptical of and treat with more scrutiny than we have been to date. And that case actually created sort of the gender discrimination framework that is still applied today. Once she served on the bench, she continued to be an advocate for women, most notably her majority opinion in the VMI case, which said that to the extent that women are able to meet the same standards that men can, they should be permitted to attend the Virginia Military Institute. Finally, and probably most notably in the context of what's going on right now, her dissenting opinion in Bush versus Gore was very, very notable. In that case, she had said that the Supreme Court had no business interpreting the election laws of a state, and the Supreme Court had no business choosing the president of the United States. And now where we have 8 members on the court and frankly, a situation that is potentially going to lead to the Supreme Court hearing yet another case about elections in the United States, to abstain from making those types of decisions would have been critical and is now going to be something that's worth keeping an eye on as the election progresses.
That's a very good point you make there. I'm going to bring our correspondent in a moment, Carl Bostic. But just on that line about politics, of course, Justice Ginsburg throughout her career underlined her belief in U.S. institutions, and she obviously recognized a shift to a much more partisan process in the run-up to the appointment of another justice, how that had become over her own lifetime on the court. I mean, I wonder how you now reflect on her passing, becoming this kind of moment in American political life in an election year and the huge outcry that's followed.
Sure, that's a great question. Frankly, first and foremost, her passing is a great loss to America as a whole, and the subsequent politicization of everything that's gone on is saddening, both to me and I'm sure to many other Americans. But one thing that I think is a primary takeaway from her life is that Ruth Bader Ginsberg was excellent at reaching across party lines. Late Justice Antonin Scalia was one of her very best friends. They went to the opera together. They were very, very close. And despite having these very deeply held convictions on which they disagreed virtually in all instances, Antonin Scalia and Ginsburg were very, very close and were able to see past those differences and reason with each other. I think that that's something that we all need to take away from her legacy in this moment, particularly, is finding ways to reason and persuade people with whom we may have fundamental disagreements.
Well, stay with us, Kendyl. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more in a moment, but let me bring our correspondent in, Carl Bostic. Thank you, Carl, for coming in. Because what we're seeing now is this body of people in the Supreme Court who might have to make a crucial decision about the election itself. I mean, Kendyl raised that point earlier, not just in terms of the Supreme Court possibly having to make a decision about which ballots or not should be counted, but in terms of how the public perceives it. I mean, for instance, if a woman is nominated, which Donald Trump says he will, it might help the president's vote with women, mightn't it?
Charles, this is such an unexpected moment in the sense that the year has seen the country so divided for so many reasons, ranging from the impact of the coronavirus, the loss of jobs and livelihoods, the sense of racial injustice by the killing of George Floyd. The point being that America is divided enough, polarized enough. How much further divided and polarized can it become? And now we hear of the death of Ruth Badar Ginsberg becoming yet another wedge that's even driving it further apart. And I think the problem is just listening to the comments made by both the Democratic challenger Joe Biden and President Trump. I mean, ironically, perversely, both of them are right in what they say. In other words, nothing can stop President Trump from choosing to nominate someone for appointment. There's no law, there's nothing written in the Constitution that says that you have to wait until X period of time after the election. But it's a sense of fairness that's what's at play. And I think that's Joe Biden. He really hit the nail on the head when he says to make this kind of move at this moment when people are already voting. Well, that just strikes of not only opportunism, but also hypocrisy, you could point out. Just to put things in context, Charles, her death so close to the election is the second closest in American history, only 46 days. You have to go back to the 1800s, the 1820s, when the Chief Justice Roger Taney died 27 days before the election. His successor or his replacement was not chosen until after the election. So to do so this close to the election, that's a lot to take in. And secondly, on average, it takes about maybe 70 days in modern times to go through the hearing and nomination process. There was a record confirmation with Sandra Day O'Connor back in the 1970s. But the point is, you're looking at a situation where, let's say President Trump announces his choice on Friday or Saturday. You're talking 39 days or 38 days before the election. And that's just incomprehensible. If you see what I'm saying.
Well, there is an argument that there are one or two people on the list, at least one of them, who had already been screened in the past, and therefore it would make it considerably faster for that person to get, assuming that's the person he nominates. But let me bring you in, Kendyl. Thank you for staying with us. I suppose the one telling aspect to this is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she was approved onto the Supreme Court, had largely bipartisan backing. I mean, it seems unimaginable today that whichever figure is put forward to replace her, that would happen now, doesn't it?
It does. And, you know, I wouldn't say that 1993, when she was appointed, was not a partisan time. It was. But I think that the nature of the Supreme Court has become more political over the years and will continue to be sort of a hot button issue in election years in particular, as the court, as we discussed, serves a meaningful check and balance on the executive branch and the judicial branch. So when we're choosing elected officials, their ability to weigh in on the court is going to be critical.
Okay, Kendyl, I want to thank you very much indeed. Kendyl Gilmore is an attorney and associate with the law firm Hogan Lovells in Philadelphia. And do stay with us, Carl. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the row that's broken out between Republicans and Democrats following the death of the hugely respected liberal U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsberg. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, Ruth Badar Ginsberg, the oldest justice on the U.S. Supreme Court and an iconic champion of women's rights, has died at the age of 87. Justice Ginsberg died on Friday of cancer at her home in Washington, D.C. The Supreme Court said the U.S. had lost a jurist of historic stature. Ruth Badar Ginsberg was a prominent feminist who fought for women's rights in the 1970s. In recent years, she became a figurehead for liberals in the U.S. As one of 4 liberal justices on the Supreme Court, her death raises the prospect of Republicans trying to expand their slender conservative majority. In a moment, we'll look some more at Justice Ginsburg's legacy and the political standoff which is likely to ensue. First, though, let's hear from Justice Ginsburg herself.
My own father arrived in this land at age 13 with no fortune and speaking no English. As testament to our nation's promise, the daughter and granddaughter of immigrants sits on the highest court in the land. In America, land of opportunity, that prospect is within the realm of the achievable. What is the difference between a bookkeeper in New York City's garment district and a Supreme Court justice? One generation, my own life bears witness. The difference between the opportunities available to my mother and those afforded me.
Justice Ruth Badar Ginsberg there, who died on Friday. Well, for more reaction to the death of Justice Ginsberg and its possible consequences for U.S. politics, I'm joined now from New Jersey by the principal attorney at the Odunlami law firm, Ifeoma Odunlami, who also happens to be a well-known legal activist in the U.S. And still with me here in the studio, Arise correspondent Carl Bostic. Straight away to you, Ifeoma, thank you very much indeed for joining us. From your point of view, as a lawyer and to some extent an activist, I mean, what's the significance of Justice Ginsberg? I've heard her referred to as the diminutive giant of American justice, a towering figure who was only 5 foot tall, and yet her charisma and her intellectual ability made her one of the dominant figures on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Thank you, Charles, for having me. Well, the death of Ruth Badar Ginsberg was a shock to all of us. But I think what I take from this, from the fact that her stature, as she was barely, she wasn't up to 5 feet, and yet the effect of all her work is incredibly larger than life. You have to remember that Justice Ginsburg was one of the 9 females in her law school. She was the only female in her graduating class, and yet she was able to go ahead and do all the things that she did. She was able to, when she tried to get a job as a law clerk, the first judge denied her that opportunity because she was a woman. And so looking at this stage where she arose in a state at a time when women were basically less than men, she went ahead to fight for the rights of women, regardless of the fact that the laws at that time were held women to be less than men. She went ahead, she was able to fight, and she was very strategic with the way she fought for gender equality. She didn't go ahead, she didn't take all the laws at the same time. She chipped away at each law that was discriminatory, and she took cases where men were even plaintiffs, because she needed to show that gender discrimination was harmful not just to men, but to women as well. And so when you look at this woman who, from all accounts, was shy, was less than 5'1", was soft-spoken, the enormity of all she has done, her ability, her dissent, which were very, very strident, and her ability to change laws for women, for the handicapped, and her vote was part of the vote that overturned the marriage ban and allowed gay people and the LGBTQ to be able to get married. She stood for all the. She stood for if you remember the Lilly Ledbetter Act, which Justice Obama signed into law, that was her dissent. That she dissented when that case was heard, where the majority found in favor of the defendant and not in favor of Lilly Ledbetter. However, as diminutive as Justice Ginsburg was, the strength of her achievements is overwhelming.
Thank you for setting that out for us. And I think it underscores the critical role, doesn't it, Carl, that the US Supreme Court plays in American life. And of course, inevitably, attention turns to how that vacancy is going to be filled. I mean, give us a sense of how that might play out. Someone said that this has given 1,000 volts of electricity into the US election campaign.
It's like really stepping onto a third rail, Charles, when you consider it. And to put things into perspective, you only have to go back to 2016. That's when you had another Supreme Court justice passing away. That was Judge Antonin Scalia. He passed away in February, a full 9 months before the election. And when Barack Obama tried to nominate Merrick Garland because Republicans controlled the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who was the head of the majority leader, said, we don't nominate or appoint justices in election year. Furthermore, it was also being said by Lindsey Graham, who's now the head of the Judiciary Committee, or one of his colleagues, saying that any Supreme Court justice should reflect the will of the people. Well, if you're having such a nomination process before the election, how is that reflecting the will of the people when it's unclear what the outcome of the election will be come November 3rd, especially either if President Trump loses the election or if the Senate itself is transformed with key Republicans losing their seats and they lose the majority.
And Carl, the US president chooses who his nominee is for the Supreme Court. And at the moment, Donald Trump has appointed 2 Supreme Court justices already, which means there is a 5-4 conservative majority on the bench. So if he appoints another before the election, it would be a 6-3 majority in favor of the conservatives now that Ruth Bader Ginsberg is gone. How much will that galvanize American politics in the few weeks before the election? Because already we're seeing the battle lines being drawn between Trump supporters and the Democrats.
Well, just to give you a sense of the flavoring of public opinion right now, Charles, we've seen 2 polls just come out, I believe, today, and in fact, we'll find out probably more later this week. One poll saying that by around 51%, 52% are against President Trump choosing a nominee himself before the election, 52% to 41%. But perhaps even more tellingly, about 61% are saying in another poll that no one should be chosen or nominated until after the election, until we know who's won the election. That should be, or more importantly, that should be done by the next president. So for example, if Joe Biden wins the election, he should be the one to nominate. So that's the kind of wedge look at right there. But when we talk about not only just the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsberg as a Supreme Court justice who's passed away, but just listening to the 2 people you've interviewed, the 2 attorneys, they're speaking about her body of record, as an activist who promoted and defended the rights of the vulnerable, especially the women and the disabled and such. The point being that it's not just a vacancy, but it's also a whole body of legislation.
Absolutely.
And the real conundrum for people that would make this a lightning rod is that Donald Trump is basically looking to potentially fill it with someone who's antithetical to what she stood for.
That's a very good point.
Even if it's a woman, it would be a woman who would actually be attempting to be rolling back some of those rights, especially when it comes to things such as the Affordable Health Care Act.
Well, we've actually got less than a minute to go now, and unfortunately I won't be able to go back to New Jersey. But on that timetable issue that you mentioned, Carl, I mean, do President Trump and the Senate actually have the time potentially to resolve this prior to November?
The answer is yes. Nothing can stop him from doing so, but it will further divide the country. He has up until January 3rd. That's when the next Senate members are sworn in. But it could leave the country badly divided, especially if he loses the election.
Okay. Carl, thank you very much indeed. Carl Bostic, our ICE correspondent there. And from New Jersey, Ifeoma Odunlami, who's the principal attorney at the Odunlami law firm. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and the United States, bye-bye and thank you for watching.